Hello, today we are working on our second charcoal pencil practice, and our focus is having accurate value matching. So at the end you'll ask yourself, do the values you drew match the values in the reference photo? So we are going to get started by turning our paper. We want our value scale closest to us. We're drawing the border of the edges of that rectangle. We're going to divide that space in half, and then we are doing something a little differently than how we have in the past. We are, instead of breaking this in half and then each of those in half once more, we are breaking this down so that we have two lines we are adding to create three even sections. And again, in this half, we are adding two lines to create three even sections, which gives us 6 instead of 8. Now we are going to turn this back. We always label that bottom one 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now let's go ahead and spin that back so that it is the value scale is closest to us, and we are going to be filling in value 5. We're going to give ourselves a border first. So take your pencil, we're drawing a rectangle all the way around value number 5. We want to make sure that this is super crisp up against those edges, so blow away your dust, because sometimes it looks like it's filled in when that is actually just a crumb resting there. So I blow away my charcoal dust all throughout my entire practice. This is something that is required so that you can tell if you are filling it in all the way or if it's going to slowly reveal a bunch of holes as you lift up your paper. So we want to blow away that dust to make sure our border is super solid. Now we're going to fill the middle of that box with solid black. Make sure you don't press too hard with these pencils just because the lead is very fragile. You don't want to break it. Once that is completely solid and you're looking to see, do you have any little white dots that are left showing after you've blown away your dust? And once that is solid, we are going to hop down to value number 3, and this is going to be the lightest that we can color with this pencil. Charcoal pencil can be difficult to color lightly with, so you aren't going to be able to get as light as you can with a regular graphite pencil, but just do your best to use small little circular motions and just barely let your pencil graze the paper. As you continue with this practice, this is one area I assume most of you will start to improve in, and it really just takes a lot of practice to be able to color lightly without showing your lines. Now we are going to make an in-between tone between these, so we want it to be a nice medium tone. So it should look darker than your light patch, but lighter than your dark patch. Now we're just filling in that medium tone. Blow away our dust. Now we want to check our blending stumps because we never really know how dark they are when we start because they are shared. Now once you've cleaned it off, and I would recommend spinning it around and just doing this a couple of times to clean off your blending stump, and then we're going to hop down to value number 1. We're going to fill that in as lightly as we can. And then we want to create just a very soft, subtle transition into white. So I might even clean my blending stump off once more, and after I've done that, just barely dust over the top of that line to help it fade into white. Now I'm going to come up to value number 2, and I'm filling that in, and typically you can just press a little bit harder and there will be enough charcoal left there to actually just make this darker without even collecting any more charcoal onto your blending stump. So it should be a light patch fading into slightly darker, and now we're working into our charcoal that we've drawn. So we're going to just, with a light pressure, color over the top of value number 3. We want to fill it in completely, and now I'm coming in with a little bit heavier pressure just to make sure that value 3 does look a little bit darker than value 2. Now we're going to come into value 4, and it's going to give us a lot of charcoal on our blending stump. So we need to be careful at this point not to bring it too far down into our light value scale. Now we're going to grab some of value 4, and I'm just going to start by going all the way over the top of just value 4, not value 5 yet, and I'm just blending that out. Now I am going to clean my blending stump off on the side of the paper. Go ahead and clean your blending stump off. And now I'm going to go over the top of this line that's dividing these spaces with a clean blending stump, and I'm just like smudging with little circles on top of that line to help them fade together. Now for value 5, we don't really want to use our blending stump across it because it's going to take all of that value. When you use your blending stump, it will take from the darker areas, which makes them lighter. So what we're going to do is just go along this bottom edge, and we are just blending with little circles along that bottom edge. And we're not really going into value 5 at all. Now what I'm going to do next is clean off my blending stump because we just touched a very dark part. And now I'm going to just go back once more through this space with my blending stump to kind of even it out. Now one nice thing about this phase is that you can come back through with your charcoal pencil as well. One thing that you should know is that it's easier to draw with charcoal pencil on top of a layer of charcoal than it is to draw with charcoal pencil on top of just plain printer paper. Kind of odd, but a cool thing to know. Now I just went back in with my charcoal pencil and added just a smidge in a couple of areas where it was looking a little bit light to me. And now I'm going back through with my blending stump. I'm going to clean it off again because that's the biggest tip I can give you, is always be working with a clean blending stump so that you can really get those transitions as smooth as possible. All right, now we are going to spin this back towards ourselves. We're giving ourselves those outlines, so the line from the outermost edge on the right, the line from the outermost edge on the bottom. This is going to show us where to connect the dots to create our value scale highlight. Then we're going to add that triangle just directly on top. So we've got our highlight and our little space where we're adding our value. Now we are going to go into the right side of this triangle where we're adding our value. We're not adding solid black, but we are going a dark medium, and we want to get lighter and lighter, and it should be as light as you can color by the time you reach the end. Now we are going to bring in our blending stump. We're switching. Go ahead and clean it off one more time. And without touching this section of charcoal, we are using our blending stump to fill in the highlight. So don't touch that charcoal, but just go around that space and we're filling in the highlight underneath. Now for this next part, we want our blending stump to be as clean as possible because we are coming in to do our lightest line. Now I want you to do this on your reference photo. You are outlining that eyeball shape. I want you to draw that line on your photo. Now we are, with our clean blending stump, going to create that line. And we're just using small, light little circles, but we're trying to just border that eyeball shape. Now I'm going to clean my blending stump off again, and I'm just going along that line with light little circles. We want to help this fade out to white. Now sometimes I'll take a finger and just like dust along that edge after I've done my row of little circles because we really want that to have just the softest transition into white. And that's just what we're focused on right now, is fading out to white in the shape of the eyeball. You can use your finger to dust, come back in with your blending stump, but we want that to be as smooth of a transition as we can get. Now we are going to come down and fill this space with our blending stump value. And we are not touching that triangle yet. We're just going all the way down to it. So go ahead and take a look up at the board right now. We have filled in above that section of value and below the section of value without actually touching that section of value. Now we are going to come in starting on our lightest side, and I am just snagging some of that lighter value and using tiny circles. I'm just working it into the space above it. So we want to lift up some of that value so that we've got a nice smooth transition. We want to make sure that we don't fill our highlight too dark. So make sure that you don't go into that space underneath with your darker value. And we're just working our way backwards along this little triangle, just adding little circles over the top of that value. I'm pressing pretty hard here and just using those little circles. Now, as I get to this point, I'm going to clean off my blending stump. I'm starting to get too much value on my blending stump right now. And as we reach this last dark spot, you want to be careful not to blend that too far out. Cleaning my blending stump off again so I can make that quick transition to the light values. Now we have added our value, but we've kind of lost some of our darker values in that process. So I'm going to come back in for my second pass now with my charcoal pencil, and I'm just kind of reapplying those darker values as they stretch downwards. So I just sort of re-added that triangle, and now I'm going to come in and I'm just dusting over the top of this fairly lightly because I don't want to remove this value, I just want to blend it out. We're trying to dust across that space so that it's all nice and smooth and so that we've got that highlight that's left behind. Take a look at your reference photo here and make sure that you're matching these values the best that you can. Remember, we're trying to recreate this photo with this charcoal medium. Now I am going to continue on. What we're going to do next is turn our paper, and we are giving ourselves this shadow that goes directly underneath our sphere. I'm bordering the sphere and I've turned my paper so that I'm coloring on the right side of the line. I'm going to blow away my dust, and you really need to continuously turn your pencil to get a nice crispy point so that you can make sure that you are coloring all the way up against the edge of the sphere. We're filling this triangle solid black, and we want to stretch our shadow going out and curving slightly at the end. We're going to continue with this very dark value, but we want to transition to a medium. So we're pressing lighter and lighter. Now we are going to give ourselves a border, and I am turning my paper so that I'm coloring on the right side of the line, and for this background we want to be nice and dark. So I am turning my pencil so that I can use a new crispy part to make sure that I'm filling in right up against the sphere. That's probably one area that you most likely struggled with at the beginning and will slowly start to improve, is making this charcoal really go up against the edge. That is a difficult thing to do. So we are just blowing away our dust and filling in around that border. Now I'm going to fill around the outside of that rectangle. And I just continuously turn my paper so that I'm coloring on the correct side. Now that I've got my border, I need to blow away my dust, make sure I've filled in all of those edges, and now we are using small circles to fill. It does not need to be solid black, but it is a very dark value. I would recommend blowing your dust away as you are doing this process so that you can make sure that you're not missing any large areas. And we are just filling with small circles. Try to avoid using lines here. All right. What we are going to do next is take our blending stump, and I am just going to make sure that first I come in and give myself those highlight edges along the top of my table. So I'm just giving myself that border. I'm going to fill in my tabletop with my blending stump, and if you don't have quite enough on your blending stump, just steal a little bit from the surface above that background space. We want to make those little slivers of highlight as skinny as we can, so make sure they're not too large. And at this point, I am not coloring into my shadow. I'm just barely going up against the edge. So I'm just going to give myself that highlight. I'm going to turn my paper now so that with my blending stump, I can make sure that I'm going all the way up against the edge of the sphere here. Now I'm getting a little bit light with my blending stump, so I'm just going to steal a little bit of value from that space above. I want to leave that crisp little highlight, and I'm turning my paper again so that I can give myself the border along that bottom edge of my rectangle. I'm going to steal a little bit from that space above to help me get this to all be a nice medium tone. We want it to be very even, so if you notice any patches, just continue adding there or blending around it. And now I'm just coloring up against the bottom of that shadow. Okay. Now our tabletop is finished. We are going to start on the light side of our shadow, blending away that texture. And we don't want to press too hard as we reach the darkest part, because it's going to steal the black at that point. So we don't want to steal it. We're just smudging away the texture. Blow away your dust, and we're going to clean off our blending stump, and we're going to go along this edge of the shadow. And that's just going to make the edge of the shadow a little bit softer so it looks more natural. Do that on the top and bottom edge of your shadow. Go along that edge just to make it look a little softer. I am also going to come back in and reapply some of my black. I noticed that this edge against the bottom of my sphere was just a little rough. So I'm coming back in with my solid black, and I'm reapplying just a little bit of my shadow as well, to make sure that I've got a start that is solid black. And then I'll just blend out a little bit along that edge to make it transition nice and smoothly. Next, we are going to blend out our background space. So we're blending in the texture, and we're also sort of lightening up this background. Make sure that you have turned your paper so that you can see right when your blending stump is touching the outside edge of your sphere. Blow away those crumbs so that you can really see when it's touching. And we are stealing some of that black just to help it not be quite so dark. We just want like a nice dark value, but not all the way black. Now, because we have all of that black on our blending stump right now, I am going to come across my sphere just once more with this dark section here, and I'm adding it to just darken up my sphere in any places I might need to. This is just a nice little last minute chance to kind of even out your sphere, add a little bit more value back in. And there we go. So now you can ask yourself the question, do your values you drew match the values in the reference photo? So take a second and compare, and if there's any spots where you say, oh, well, this part's a little bit lighter, you can always come back in and add that next layer. We want to continue working to make these pictures match the best that we can. All right, thank you for watching.